I wanted to talk a little bit about the Rematriating Borikén portrait series. Started with a painting that I made of my children and myself at the age they were when we arrived, 2 and 5. Um, it was the first piece that I created inspired by the abyss, by the Puerto Rico Trench. That painting was created together with the Rematriating Boriken manifesto. And shortly thereafter was when I came up with the idea that I would do a series of portraits of folks who, like myself, were on the rematriation journey. So, keeping true to that initial inspiration and true to my work, focusing on Boricua bioluminescence, which really began for me in 2006 in Vieques, it became yet another version of Boricua bioluminescence, which was exploring the Puerto Rico Trench, deepest part of the Atlantic Ocean, second deepest part of the Earth's crust after the Mariana Trench, which is off the coast of another U.S. colony, the Northern Mariana Islands, and Guam in the Pacific Ocean. 36,000 feet is the Mariana Trench. Ours is almost 28,000 feet. In order to prepare for this series of portraits, I am conducting interviews of the folks that I would like to feature. What are those elements? What are these things that we're picking up along the way that have helped us, and that if we share them could help other folks, right? Getting them to think on that, so it's not just preparing to get their images ready for these painted portraits. It's also about gathering information on what is a Boricua specific rematriation practice, to explain the Puerto Rico Trench being the abyss, that being another form of Boricua bioluminescence, which is the creatures of the abyss. And when I say abyss, I'm talking about, like, 10,000 feet down, 20,000 feet down. What lives down there? What does not live down there is sunlight. And because it is so dark, those animals produce their own light. It's very different than our bioluminescent bays. One of the key features of our bioluminescent bays is that they have to be shallow waters. Those shallow waters allow for the warmth that make the conditions favorable to the dinoflagellates, which are the microcell organisms or the single cell organisms that glow when the water is agitated. That's what we see in Vieques, that's what we see in Lajas, that's what we see in Fajardo primarily, although that's not the only places where they exist, but it is where they exist in a high concentration, with the Vieques Bay being considered the brightest in the world. Pues lo que pasa down in the abyss is that because there's no sunlight down there, these animals have to fend for themselves. They have to illuminate. They have to either produce this light themselves, or they have to work symbiotically with other organisms who produce the light for them, which is from the US. Here, we cross on plane. For those who left earlier and cruzaron y brincaron el charco, crossing north, you see the trench. You see the trench from the plane. The irony is that when you travel here via plane, you're traveling roughly at the same altitude, the inverse, that altitude you travel at, which could go up to 30,000 feet and above, is almost in essence an inverse of how the Earth's surface plummets down at the trench. So la oscuridad, the darkness of colonialism, the darkness of multiple power outages on the colonialism substandard services, the darkness of climate change, these projects like Cucubanacion and this one coming to me as projects where I started working specifically with dark backgrounds, black backgrounds, and working with Boricua bioluminescence, really were born in me after having lived 4.5 months without electricity at home and in my studio following Hurricane Maria. So the plan for this portrait series is to paint us as Boricuas bioluminescentes or bioluminescent Boricuas, like channeling our own inner light. It's a metaphor for, like, considering darkness and also blackness, and how colonialism has always worked to erase blackness and to como se dice, to vilify Blackness. So one of the things I was told in the bioluminescent bay in Vieques is that the Spanish colonizers actually feared the bioluminescent waters because they didn't understand it. They thought it was cursed. So the concept for me is for us to meditate on darkness. This is a corner in Cucubanacion, which functions as my art space here in Mayagüez on the main island of Borikén on the west side. And it's bringing folks like me on this rematriation journey to immerse ourselves into this darkness, into this space, to contemplate, to reflect, to go within and think about this journey and think about the lessons of this journey, the challenges of this journey, how we have grown on this journey. And me shining UV lights, into the space, diferente lucecita, the UV being that down in the abyss, those creatures don't necessarily see with the same eyes as we do. The spectrum of color doesn't work the way we see it up here, where we have access to white light or natural light of the sun. But it has certainly been an interesting exploration for me. And it is my way of envisioning our people and getting us to envision ourselves differently. This is an aesthetic that is born from my being born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I was born in 1975. So when I was growing up in Brooklyn, my tío Pablo had black velvet paintings in his apartment with like women in afros and stuff. And these images glowed. They were glowing neon images under these black lights. And this was an aesthetic from my childhood that I never forgot. This was very prevalent in like the Black and brown power communities. It was used not just in the African American community, but it was also used among the Chicano community on the west coast of the US. And so I'm also bringing that back. Like I'm bringing back this Brooklyn aesthetic because that's where I was born and raised, and that's my flavor, even though I've been in Borikén for 9 years. So it's fusing the aesthetics of both sides, fusing the light-informed aesthetics of our natural environment with the Black and brown power aesthetics of the civil rights movement that I was born into, and the Black and brown power decade of the 1970s that I am a product of, and that still very much inspires my work.